everybody. This is Neroke 5, and this is the Red Pill Nation Hangout, number 22. Let's just take a look here if thing actually getting sound, because this has been an ongoing issue with me. I got to actually check and make sure that I've actually got sound before I. Yep. All right. All right. All right. So that's good there. Am I get okay? All right, let's just check, let's go just check the, good old, kick stream here. Alright, yep, alright, looks like I'm good there as well. So, yeah, welcome to the Neroke 5 live stream number 22. I am your host, Neroke 5. Yep, playing the intro music, and I gotta go check while I go run over to my other computer and check something and make sure that I'm on Twitch. So here we go. 6 wings below. Here we go.
Why no escape from what I know. Call it glory, call it sound, heaven's claws in sacred ground. If this is God, I stand condemned, sanctified, never end.
Welcome everybody to the Neroke 5 live stream number 22. I am your host, and I'm the Neroke 5. Probably know me from Red Pill Nation. Going to later, the one who's been going over onto my BitChute account and downvoting every single video I put up that's critical of feminism, and I do mean all of them. Yeah, must be kind of pathetic that you have to wait around for me to do that. That's the posts are gonna come up. Posts are gonna be posted up. Like, just deal with it. Now, for those of you, yes, I am at BitChute, Rumble, which I'm streaming from right now, Odyssey, MGTOW TV, YouTube, which continues to grow at a rather exponential rate, Brighteon, Kick, and I mean, I am on Twitch, but I mean, I'm not gaining any followers on Twitch. Although I will say, give a special hello out to these one single solitary person who is actually listening to me on Twitch right now. Welcome aboard. I again, right, my live streams are not usually particularly well listened to. It's usually the after where I get my audience in. The topics for tonight, and there are four of them. There's the Dark Force Women and how it affected the Manosphere. I'm going to go way back to the late 90s, in 90s and the 2000s, probably all the way up, probably until about 2006. And that transition period between about 2006 and 2012, 2013, where men started comparing notes. I will give you a bit of a history and why it is important that lines of communication continue to be maintained between the various factions in the Manosphere, regardless of whether we actually agree on the method of which we will empower ourselves. It's very important that men continue to compare notes. Topic number 2, and this actually ties into a conversation I had at the end of 487 with somebody, and this is not gonna this one, and and there's an inconvenient truth that a lot of people in the middle, men in the middle, and you've been seeing a lot of stuff going on, but yeah, it's an inconvenient truth. And then topic number 3, and there's a whole bunch of them here. Attacks on the Manosphere. Lawrence Southern is at it again. Andrew Tate is being investigated again. Rolo Tomasi and other Manosphere content get their Twitter accounts hacked. And number 4, and this one is really interesting because I only found out about this one yesterday, and I thought about moving it to number 23. And what I ended up deciding to do is I decided I was going to include it on this one. it's a very awkward and uncomfortable topic, and it involves an adult website and how CNN did an investigation on it. Feminists try to guilt all men over CNA expose on adult website motherless.com. Motherless.com. Well, I mean, again, right? Like, we've seen this sort of thing also happen on Pornhub. We've seen it on a few other places. So, yeah, that's the beginning of the topics. Anyway, yeah, I'm also at Facebook Minds, Gab, MeWe, Getter. That is it for now. Oh yeah, and I do have a WordPress, the Red Pill Nation one. I very rarely ever post up that. I'm going to have to start doing that. I also have a Patreon, of which I will stick the banner down below, and I'm also going to have to start paying a little bit more attention to that banner and to that site, as the aim here for me is to continue to do this stuff until I die or find something better to do, as you keep hearing on the Red Pill Nation Hangout, which, by the way, I will be doing tomorrow. Make a note of it. It is going to be extremely, if there's anybody who's like a regular guest on the Red Pill Nation Hangout that comes on what the panels show. I am going to be doing the show probably as soon as I get up tomorrow, because I have to be at work at 9 o'clock in the evening. So yeah, that means that I'm probably going to be doing this show as soon as I get up tomorrow. Well, actually, now this morning. Doing better than I've been doing in a very, very long time. You know, I'm finding it. Yeah, my fortune. Like, I mean, I am on the uptake from what has been a rather difficult period that lasted almost 2 years. Yeah. So, I think it's one of the things that's kept me anchored, uh, and kept me grounded. Strangely enough, was this podcast and the things that I was having to do with this podcast, and it helped me. It was a consistent rock and a consistent schedule thing that I had to do every single week. I have been tempted over the past couple of weeks to kind of like maybe take a break on that. I will let you know if I decide to take a break for a couple of weeks. I rather hesitant on doing this because the last time I decided to take a break for a quote unquote couple of weeks, that couple of weeks turned into like 23 months or 22 months before I did something. And I don't want that to happen again. Um, that is it for personal stuff. Yes, by the way, I do have a Telegram and I do have a Gab group on Gab, and I do have a Telegram. Links to join are down below in the low bar if you want to find them. If you are listening, in particular, if you are listening to me on Rumble, they're definitely down in the low bar. Again, I will be putting them, except of course for YouTube, which doesn't allow me to post links. But I mean, yeah, I will be posting them down in the low bar. So anyway, I'm doing a solo. As per usual with with this live stream, I'm going to be doing a solo. I do solo show on this one. Getting used to doing more solo shows. I might even be doing RPN 488. I might actually even be doing a solo show on that tomorrow. And again, make a note of the time, because I will probably be doing that show within about an hour or an hour and a half of me getting up tomorrow morning. Or actually not tomorrow morning, this morning, because it's 5 minutes to 1 here. So anyway, for those of you who are grinding it out and staying awake to listen to me, thank you very much. I am going to go into the first topic here, and this is a particularly interesting topic, and I'm it's going to be a bit of a history lesson uh, here, because I'm going to kind of venture off into into I'm going to be starting off on a place that you don't usually hear me starting off at, but I mean, I think it's a place that I think we really do need to start off at, because it does apply specifically. It definitely applies to um, the uh, the manosphere and the issues that the manosphere and the history of the manosphere that we've gone that it's gone through, and that is the and this has been something that feminists have, and again, it will continue to be an issue, because there's always going to be men that are going to potential there's going to be counter mating strategies. There's always going to be those white knights and those simps, those male feminists that are going to agree with feminists, just in order to get their noodle wet, is what it basically boils down to. Now, feminists had a particularly advantageous situation, probably all the way up until the Lorena Bobbitt situation. Men really, again, and this is something that Lawrence Southern covered years ago. Men do not identify with other men just because they're men, right? Usually, the conversation with men identifying with other men is that it usually has to be a common denominator between them. Women do not have that particular division nearly as much. Men, it's like divisions of culture, divisions of political preference, divisions of job, divisions of class. You know, these are not and to a certain extent and of race of as well. Uh the innate and again, this is something that again, if you go into my MGTOW, if you go and look at my turd flinging monkey series, one of the videos that I have posted up at my MGTOW is called The Enemies of Man. And one of the big enemies of men is the innate tribalism that men have, right? There's not, for instance, there's not generally, like, each man has his own individual tribe, his own group of friends, and sometimes that's family, sometimes that's friends, sometimes it's coworkers. It's people that they have a level of trust with, and particularly in the military. Again, I haven't served in the military. I do understand, though, from having spoken and read some issues with guys in the military, that, I mean, guys in military units develop a stronger bond with their cohorts than they do with their own wives. If there's somebody in the military that wants to expand upon that, I will. What that basically means, though, is that if you ain't part of with men, if you ain't part of the group, you don't matter, right? Each man has a personal grouping, averages about 10 to 12 other people, usually other men. And there's an extended tribe. Basically, if you average it out, it basically comes out to somewhere between 100 and 150 men in his own individual tribe, right? What that boils down to in terms of information, in terms of what a guy is willing to share, what a guy is willing to not share, what he's willing to trust, and the number of guys that he's willing to trust, intimately. And when I mean intimately, I don't mean sexually. I mean willing to bare his soul to these guys and to tell them everything that's going on in their lives. That group of men is very, very small, right? If you are not part of that group, you are not, if you, for instance, and this has happened to me, I have had to stay silent on a couple of occasions when a guy, for instance, in like say a camp situation or whatever, or somebody in the room in a 12-step room is having relationship difficulties, I cannot just walk up to that man and summarily volunteer information to that man. You know, sometime again, right? And like it's like I've literally, and it was almost one. There's one situation where I literally, one guy actually got downright hostile and angry with me, and I that was a big lesson for me. One of the things I had to look at him and go, okay, you don't want to fucking listen to me. Find out the hard way, you stupid motherfucker. And he did find out the hard way. Um, and my information ended up being correct. The silent look of embarrassment on his face a couple of weeks later, it was very hard for me not to glow. But that is the nature of male associations. If you're not part of that group, you cannot volunteer information. And that is the way most male social groups are, are structured. This, by the way, is also to a certain extent how the Manosphere is structured. You have, well, I mean, I'm just going to name off the big four, right? MGTOW, PUA, now rebranded itself as the Red Pill, Men's Rights, Father's Rights. Now, there's a couple more in there. There's Black Pill, there's IBMore. Some people will include Incel. I don't. You know, there's a bunch of other smaller groups that are kind of all type, but each one of those particular groups has their own focus and their own way of dealing with it. And those particular, oh, and there's also other things, keepers and the Sterling Institute of Relationship. And yeah, I will get into the Sterling Institute of Relationship in just a moment here, right? Uh, Now, looking at it from the other side, and this is a mistake that I have commonly seen feminists and people in the mainstream media, whatever, do, is that they tend to treat the manosphere just kind of almost like they treat feminism as just a huge, massive grouping. And that's not what it's about, right? Each one, in particular, the big four. I'm going to go with the big four here: father's rights, men's rights, MGTOW, and PUA. MGTOW and PUA do not generally get along or speak to each other very much. PUAs don't like MGTOW. And for the PUAs that are potentially listening to this, yeah, I can tell you because I know for a fact, because I am a MGTOW, a lot of MGTOWs don't like you either, right? Like it's a mutual thing, right? Like the two groups have the reason why they are like that is because their strategies for dealing with the female situation are completely the opposite to each other. And while I personally think, as a MGTOW, that learning some PUA techniques and listening to some of the spokespeople in the PUA community and listening to what they have to say and incorporating that into my life, even if I'm not necessarily looking for women, which I am not, there is stuff that I can learn. For instance, Rollo Tomasi is an absolute encyclopedia of information. Now, I have heard guys in MGTOW say that he stole a lot of his ideas from MGTOW wisdom. I don't, if he did that or not, I don't really particularly care. Rolo Tomasi in particular. Some of the other guys have also got, there's some of the other PUA/red pill commentators have also come up with some good ideas. And of course, you've also got guys like, say, Aaron Clary, who, for the love of fucking God, I do not know why he just does not say he's fucking MGTOW. It is beyond me, but that is Aaron Clary. They overlap, but they're not. For instance, father's rights is father's rights is got a lot of actual full-blown leftists in the father's rights movement and in the men's rights movement, and they are actually there's a little bit of antipathy, in particular towards MGTOW and the PUA/red pill factions. Sterling, and this is something I did because I was on a Sterling Bridge call here about 3 weeks ago, and I started talking about Manosphere content, and one of the guys on this call said he was not okay with me lumping the Sterling Institute of Relationship into the greater Manosphere. And I had to point out to him, and this is something that we need to keep in mind when we're dealing with feminists, the mainstream media, or anybody that's not actually involved in the Manosphere right now. In the eyes of anybody who's not actually in the Manosphere or does not have a working knowledge of the Manosphere, every group is part of the Manosphere. So that would include the Promise Keepers. That would include the Sterling Institute of Relationship. Whether you actually, again, I don't know if there's anybody from Sterling that's actually listening or not. But I mean, yeah, whether those guys like to admit it or not, they are part of the Manosphere. The people on the other side do not care about again, this is, I'm going to probably have to do a particular video, a live stream about that particular topic, right? They do not care about the nuances inside the Manosphere, right? And for what happened though is probably starting, and this really actually, because there was a couple of key turning events here. First of all, there was the Lorena Bobbitt situation, which happened back in '92. But between '92 and say 2006, you know, sorry, there was a, there was a growing awareness of the situation. What happened with Duke Lacrosse was an actual kind of like watershed moment for the Manosphere in general, because what happened with Duke Lacrosse is that you had individuals that pushed it a little bit too far. You had an overzealous prosecutor who pushed things just a little bit too well. Actually, he didn't just push a little bit too far. Like, Wilfong was aiming to get the members of that Duke Lacrosse team in jail and was willing to break the law to do it. Right? What that did, though, is that around that time, and I know this because, I've had the pleasure of actually talking to a couple, for instance, with MGTOW. I had the pleasure of talking to a couple of guys who were actually at that bar in I can't remember what the name, Asheville, North Carolina, where they came up with the concept of MGTOW shortly after what had happened with MGTOW had happened, right? I've had the pleasure of talking to some of those. I've got books from the mid 2000s for the PUA community, in particular Style and his writings. I know that Rollo Tomasi has been around for that period of time as well. There's a few people that were around in the early years. Here's the thing that happened. There was a transition period between 2006 and 2013 where there was a growing awareness of the situation. What happened in 2013, you had what effectively amounted to a turning point, which was, of course, Donglegate. And Donglegate, it's not a coincidence that the Manosphere, you can track guys like Sandman and Barbarossa and Terrence Pop and a few others. Actually go and you can look at their and you can go back and you can see that although a lot of these guys started 2013, 2014 is when a lot of like Sandman started. I've actually watched the first Sandman video, which is still up at YouTube, by the way. I've watched that video multiple times over the years. He started out in 2013. Now, what happened though after 2013 is that, and this is specifically my personal story, is that men everywhere for the first time began to realize that it wasn't just them. They weren't by themselves, right? And this is the issue that, in particular, the establishment, but I mean, feminism in particularly was able to take advantage of was the fact that, I mean, the inherent tribalism of men prevented men from different races, different cultures, different sects of the manosphere, whatever, from actually speaking to each other. And because these guys did not talk to each other, this is why I, in particular, why I tap into Sterling, why I listen to the guys in the PUA community, why I still keep linked into men's rights and fathers' rights issues, right? Because each one of those groups has a take on the gynocentric world order at this point. And because they have a certain take on the gynocentric, each one of them has a strategy to deal with it. And each one of those strategies, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to get your ego out of the way, and specifically if you're willing to not live in the dark forest and actually talk to men in other areas of the manosphere and exchange information with them, and that's exactly what happened in 2013. Men from liberals, conservatives, black, white, Asian, rich, poor, all across the spectrum, men started talking to each other. Men started communicating with each other. And one of the big things that came up on it, and lo and behold, it's true, is that, and this is what happened with me in my situation. My personal situation was that I personally, I mean, I was MGTOW before the term existed, but for me personally, I did not see the point. I did not see, and even specifically after doing the Sterling Men's Weekend back in the late 90s, I did not see cohabitation or marriage as being something that I really wanted to have in my life. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't add up. It didn't really, there's just something about it that didn't appeal to me. When I got a hold of Hell of the Smiths Men on Strike book and I read it, and it was like, and I realized for the first time that it wasn't just me that felt that way about that particular situation. That was a game changer, right? Because I had been involved in the PUA community up until that point, and I'd also been involved in Sterling, and I kind of sort of knew about men's rights and fathers' rights, but I mean, it wasn't something that I was really into. But after I discovered MGTOW, and I would also like to send a strong thank you out to the assholes at over at Atheism Plus, who were so incredibly fucking dogmatic and intolerant, and were sterling prime examples of what we're still seeing today from a segment of the wokeism, the woke crowd. Uh, you know, and the way they tried to ram their beliefs down the throat of everybody in the atheist community via Atheism Plus back in 2013, 2014. I would not have started I would not have started looking around for other options, and I would not have found Helen Smith's Manosphere. I would not have found MGTOW, right? So yeah, right. But I didn't stray out of Sterling very much, right? I didn't stop to ask questions. I didn't stop to look around. When I started looking around, I suddenly realized it wasn't just me. And that's something that I think I mean, a lot of my listeners are probably at that point where they understand that it's not just them, that it's not just you. And this is something that I have to really emphasize here, right? The dark forest will not liberate men. Not talking to other men in other factions of the manosphere is not going to liberate men, right? I mean, while I don't think that there's ever going to be a kumbaya come to quote unquote come to Jesus moment where everybody in the manosphere is going, all the groups in the manosphere, be it PUA, MGTOW, Father's Rights, Men's Rights, Sterling, Promise Keepers, etc., are all going to fucking hang around in a circle around a campfire and sing kumbaya. I don't think that's ever going to happen, right? Each man is going to have his own strategy to deal with the situation, and that's what is going to work for them. What we can do, however, and there's definitely a need to push past the innate male tribalism that exists even inside the manosphere. And what I think really needs to happen is there needs to be like lines of communication between these groups, even if these groups don't particularly. I mean, there's guys, for instance, in the PUA community that I really cannot fucking stand, right? I got a very kind of mixed opinion, for instance, about Andrew Tate. There's a few guys. I mean, and there's guys in the Manosphere now that I haven't even heard of. Like, I kind of heard about HS Tiki Taki until the Louis Theroux documentary came out. Like, I definitely don't particularly like Sneeko much at all, right? There's, yeah, we don't have to be best buds. And I'm talking in particular to the MGTOW, but I'm also going to talk to the PUAs. I'm going to talk to the men's rights people. I'm going to also talk to the guys in father's rights or anybody who's tied into the manosphere here. We don't have to be best buds with the guys in other factions inside the manosphere. There's absolutely a need to keep the infighting down to a minimum. We need to remember who the real enemy here is, and it ain't other guys in the manosphere, right? there has been accusations of guys, for instance, in the red pill slash PUA community attempting to shut down MGTOW channels. I don't know whether that's got validity or not because they were cutting into their profit margins. I don't know whether that's actually true or not, right? I don't. But, you know, lines of communication are important. Talking to other guys in other aspects of the manosphere is really important in gaining wisdom from other groups of men in other factions of the manosphere is very important. The broader the base, the stronger the pillar. And yeah, I'm just going to finish off with this particular point before I move on to the next topic. And that is the fact that, you know, there's always going to be an other, and then male tribalism is always going to exist. But you need to remember that it's not just, I mean, the manosphere isn't just about you. The manosphere is about every man that is coming out of the dark forest, finding the light and making sure that somebody is there to help that particular new man find his own path to freedom. Even if that path is so ultimately the opposite of, say, for instance, me as a part of the MGTOW, it's the opposite of the MGTOW praxeology. And yeah, that's really about it, right? Like feminists were able to take advantage of the dark force and were able to take advantage of innate tribalism and the fact that men do not look with if they having a difficulty, they will confess to their group. And if nobody in the group has an answer, then there's not an answer. And it's like, and the person who's sitting on the outside is not necessarily either going to be asked, nor is he even going, in a lot of cases, even going to be allowed to submit information or a solution. And when you got to understand yeah, that's a bit of a detriment, but I mean, that's just the way male nature works, right? Stay out of the dark forest, though, right? You need to be able to communicate to other people because it's when men for me, and this is me talking directly, when men start comparing notes, they find out that they're not necessarily the only guy going through it. That's a very liberating part. It can also be, again, right? Can be a very shocking point, but it can be a very liberating thing for men to deal with. And with that, I am going to move on to the next topic here. Topic number 2. An inconvenient truth or an unpleasant truth. You heard me talk earlier about how I was talking to an individual at the end of 487. One of the people that I was co-hosting with at the end of Red Pill Nation 487. We ended up having a rather lengthy conversation because what I have been seeing is that we're getting a lot of not particularly woke, less like people who are not necessarily part of the manosphere, but are not woke either, conservative commentators, other people dealing with other topics, conspiracy theorists, whatever, and they have been noticing things. Awfuls, affluent white female, affluent white female urban liberals, awfuls. And they've been talking about toxic empathy and destructive behaviors and about how women will knowingly engage in certain behaviors, even if it is detrimental to the people around them and detrimental to the society around them, because feelings are virtue signaling or it helps boost their status with other women in their group. And that is known as toxic empathy. And you got Karas and you've got awfuls and you've got all these things, and particularly what happened with that one, I can't remember her name, the one who tried to run over those ICE officers in Minnesota, right? And I saw a lot of women making excuses for her behavior. I saw a lot of women making excuses for Alex Preddy as well, and making excuses for, and yeah, this actually happened, making excuses for criminals, rapists, genuinely bad people, people who should not be and should have never even have been allowed to cross the border into or come to the West at all. There seems to be, like, as pictures in particular in Europe right now, and I covered this on RPN 457 or 487, sorry. There seems to be almost like a come to Jesus moment with a lot of people in Europe. And there's also, I'm not seeing it so much in Canada, but there is a growing realization about the immigrant situation. And they're also realizing about how there's just a lot of women that are driving these this forward, and particularly with the immigration. And my issue is, and this is something, and I mean, I will be getting into this when I get into topic number 3, in particular with Lord Southern, is that the a lot of these groups, a lot of these podcasters, and a lot of these people are talking about these women like they're just some god awful new discovery that they're just finding out about. And the truth of the matter is that if these people had bothered looking and talking to guys in the Manosphere, and some of them have, let's be honest with you, but I mean, again, like a lot of them haven't, and some of them don't until they, again, Steven Crowder comes to mind. He was he was actually insulting towards the Manosphere for years until his wife started fucking him over. Then he changed his mind. That has happened a few times over the years, right? They're told about it, but it just kind of like goes, yeah, 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 and then just keep going on. They just ignore what's going on, right? Until it actually hits them, right? Like, I get it, right? There are some unpleasant truths that the Manosphere tells you about women. And one of the big ones, and this is one specifically from MGTOW, is that any interaction you have with a woman effectively hands her a metaphorical gun that she can turn and use on you in a moment's notice, right? Like, and when I get to motherless, when I get to motherless, which is going to be topic number 4, you're gonna see more of this. It's the projection that, like, a woman if there's a domestic situation, the Duluth model, which, by the way, is still the model that a lot of police forces use in the West, in particular in North America, treats the man as the culprit in a domestic abuse situation, even though there has been clear evidence shown over the years that, domestic violence is not just necessarily the purview of the male. And getting into getting into and discussing these issues with other men that are not like you, even with these men that are like putting two and two together and coming up with and like seeing it, even when they talk about this stuff, they still don't want to come to terms with some of the factors. And again, I will specifically, when I get into Lawrence Southern, I will be a lot more straightforward about this. They don't want to come to the fact that it's like they're talking about these cares, and they're talking about this toxic empathy, and they're talking about these women that are willing to virtue signal for some of the worst fucking human beings on the earth, because it causes them to look good to all their to quote unquote their older libtard buddies, right? They're willing to allow Somalis to rob the government blind so that they can and protest that so that they can look good to their friends, right? They are willing to run block for rapists, murderers, drug dealers, psychopaths, sociopaths, some of the worst people on the planet. They are willing to run block to prevent people like this. And this is not just a US thing, but in talking specifically about the US, they're willing to do this in the US right now. They're willing to they're willing to run block for these, even like, I mean, I saw a video where like a guy from ICE gets out of this vehicle with this one woman that's blocking it, and they specifically tell her, and this, I've seen a couple of videos like this where they tell her that the person they're running block for has been charged with rape or pedophilia, and these women will still continue to interfere. Some of these women, by the way, are like, there's a huge disconnect. You know, some of these women are actually full-blown feminists, right? Like they will talk, and when I get into topic number 4, I'll get into more about some feminist actions that have been going on here. But they're willing to do that to just to look good, right? And I message these people and I tell them, and it's like, why are you acting like this is a surprise? If you had been in the manosphere as long as again, to the people in the manosphere, Karens are not a new thing. Awfuls are not a new thing. Stunned, fucktard, stupid white liberal, well, not just white liberal, but liberal women are not a new thing. They've been around for a very, very long time. And I have and I have specifically pointed this out to them, and it just goes through in one ear and out the other. And it's like, because it's an unpleasant truth, right? Like, this is a problem that has been building for years, potentially even decades, but in particular, and since probably about 2017, it's been really building badly. And again, it appears to be on the decline now, but it is still building. And when you tell these individuals, it's like, well, you know what? Like, the strategies for dealing with these women, the Manosphere's had them down for years, and they won't fucking go over and look and learn. And remember, I was telling to you about tribalism earlier. This is another example of the dark forest, right? The guys, the men in the Manosphere are they're the other tribe. They're the black sheep, right? They're the ones telling the unpleasant truths that some of these individuals don't want to acknowledge, because if they actually were to acknowledge how bad the situation is with women right now, they they might, it's an uncomfortable thing. And what I'm fearing and what I'm thinking is what it's going to require is that it's going to, like, literally and figuratively require um somebody dying, or some feminist or some a-feminist ally doing something massively, heroically, epically fucking stupid or destructive for people to wake up. And here's the thing, right? As a guy in the manosphere, right? I can understand the frustration, right? Because it's like, especially if you've been around for a while, you can see it. It's sitting there, it's staring you right in the face. You're looking at it and you're screaming at these people over here, like, wake the fuck up. Just look at this. And they won't do it. And it's frustrating. And it's aggravating, you know? And it's like, what are you going to do? Well, there's not much you can do. If they don't want to clue in to what's going on, they don't want to clue into the entirety of the situation. If they don't want to accept the unpleasant truth, if they're willing, as you can clearly see from the head of the video, the picture I have up right now, if they're willing to accept an unpleasant half truth or an uncomfortable lie, or not deal with the full, unvarnished, unpleasant truth of the Karen, of the awful, of toxic empathy, of these women that are willing to overlook and willing to look, for instance, and I'm going to bring up again, I'm going to bring up the same situation in Minneapolis and LA, like, willing to overlook rapists, murderers, drug dealers, psychopaths, sociopaths, career criminals, because they're more concerned about looking good to their friends or feeling better about their lives, rather than looking at the unpleasant truth of the fact that they're running block for these individuals that are creating destructive patterns in North American society and in Western society. Yeah, it can be downright unpleasant and uncomfortable, right? You know, like, they're not willing to, quote unquote, take the red pill and go all the way over the line. And, you know, it's really frustrating. But again, right, and what I'm going to say about this is true. And at the same time, though, while it is frustrating and while it is aggravating, at the same time, though, it's like, because they don't want to do it, basically, what you have to keep doing, though, is you have to keep standing and you have to keep pointing, right? Because some of them do wise up. And yeah, it is eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be kind of like in the stage four, 8 stages of a movement by Bill Moyer. It is going to hit stage four at some point. It is going to hit it's gonna hit a point where one of these women or one of these male feminists is going, or one of these trans people is going to do something. It's probably going to be something small, right? It's not going to be anything big. It's going to be one innocuous issue, but it's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. While it is aggravating to see these guys, see these these truth commentators and these other people in these other segments of society talk about this stuff and act like it's a new thing and completely ignore the manosphere on it, right? It's kind of aggravating. It's almost insulting, right? Like, it is. Like, for instance, right, the situation, for instance, with Steven Crowder, when it first occurred, and I'm just going to be straight up with you. When I first found out with what happened with Steven Crowder, my my instinct was lawn chair, popcorn. Yeah, fuck you, Steve. Serves you fucking right. You insulting fucking asshole. Suffer. Learn the fucking hard way, right? Fortunately, somebody else in the Manosphere pointed out to me that's not necessarily the most healthy thing to be doing. But I mean, again, right? Steven Crowder had been downright fucking insulting and ignorant of the issues of the Manosphere until it happened to him. Now, you can get really frustrated about the fact that they just seem oh so close, but they're not quite there yet. And you want to push really hard to get them there, right? And you would want to get frustrated about the fact that they're just not quite over the line yet. Or you can get excited about the fact that, yeah, an increasingly larger segment of society is getting to that line, is seeing what's going on, and is collectively getting closer to that line, and it is going to there. You got one of the things you got to understand is that at some point, right, somebody is going to eventually. They are going to be. Oh, hey, hi, K Duty. Yeah, sorry, I actually got somebody talking to me on my one whole listener on on Kick is actually talking to me here. Hold on a second here. I'm going to see if I can't respond to him for a second here. K Cody Y. All right, I don't know who that is, but hi, Cody. Here you go. See if I can't respond to you here. It's computer's being very, very twitchy. Yeah, sorry, Cody. Computer's being really twitchy. I'm just gonna say hello to my one listener on Kick right now who's actually in the comments. Just see if there's anybody in the comments on the live stream here. No, and I don't feel like running over to the other computer to check if anybody is listening on and commenting on Twitch. Sorry, I cannot bring up Twitch on this particular computer. The issue that you got, again, going back, you can get frustrated about the fact that they're getting close but not getting there, or you can get excited about the fact that more and more and more people are becoming aware of toxic toxic female behavior and becoming more aware of it and becoming aware of how destructive it actually is. And I don't want for it to be that one trigger event that causes a collective outrage against feminism, but that I suspect that that's what it's going to take, and it's probably not going to be anything big. It's probably going to be something small, right? As a guy in the Manosphere, though, you know what the truth is. You know what the reality is of the situation, be you being an MRA, a father's rights activist, a PUA, or a MGTOW, or any of the other factions. You have your path to follow. What's really important here is that you just keep talking and you keep spreading the word. You don't pull up the ladder behind you, because there are thousands and now millions, not tens of millions, but millions, hundreds of thousands of men coming up behind you that people like myself need to be blazing a trail for. Find your truth for you. Don't worry about whether society as a collective is going to wise up or not, right? Feminists are going to be feminists. They're going to be toxic. They're going to be bad. They're going to be man-hating. They're going to be misandric. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. All I got to do is just keep standing and pointing. Any of the old guard in the Manosphere has to do is stand and point, right? Like, for instance, Louis Theroux did this documentary, which I will be covering on topic 3 to a certain extent, of the Manosphere. And, you know, he very specifically did not address any of the issues of the Manosphere. Why did he not address any of the issues of the Manosphere? Because it would be brutally uncomfortable. He would have to start making some explanations if he had, right? Doesn't matter if humanity or Western society or the US or Canada or the other places suddenly put 2 and 2 together and realize that they've been lied to. They're gonna figure each man one at a time is gonna figure out what they need to do for themselves, and that's what you got to do, right? I've talked about this before in your own personal revolution. It's not you versus society. It's you versus the environment. It's you versus one. And what it ultimately boils down to is you versus one other person, right? To quote this one time, the TV series is no longer on the air, but I mean, I remember this one TV show about about fighter pilots getting in World War II, in the Israeli war, and whatever. And there was one, I believe he was an Israeli pilot, and I remember this very specifically, right? And this is true specifically with the internet. No matter how many people you have arrayed against you, ultimately, it's when you're responding to somebody, you are responding, unless you're putting it to a group chat. You're dealing with the person one-on-one. No matter how many people you have arrayed against you, you are only dealing with one person at a time. This is something that I remember very specifically, because if you think you go back to Livestream number 9 or number 7 or whatever, where I was dealing with that one pissed off feminist at Twitter who sent her Twitter mob after me, right? That was something that I was keeping very much in mind in that situation. Like, I had a full blown Twitter mob coming after me, and I kept my head about me. And I realized that no matter how many of these people they sent at me, when I'm responding to each of these people, I'm only responding to one person at a time. And I was very selective about who I responded to. And I have enough experience to realize when somebody was just basically in there to just troll me, and I would just simply block them. And ultimately, this woman's attempt to intimidate me or to shut me up failed, and I won. I was probably facing down one of the largest mobs that I'd ever faced. And I got 2-3 days afterwards, came out the other end, and I got to say, your Twitter mob fucking failed. Now, not everybody has the experience to deal with a Twitter mob, but I may have to do a video specifically on how to deal with these woke mobs, because these woke mobs are they're coming, right? They're gonna be there. But it's like, yeah, I understand. Again, going back, circling around here, I understand that there's a lot of people out there that don't want to accept unpleasant truths, or don't want to deal with the full extent of how badly the female half of the opposite sex has deteriorated. The caliber of woman has deteriorated noticeably, in particular in the last 10 years. And I don't want to grasp the full monumentality of it, but when I get into the next topic, you will see how bad it actually got. But I mean, it's like, yeah, you only got to deal with yourself and the people immediately around you. You don't have to worry about society. Women and feminists will self-destruct on their own. All you got to do is just point it out. And with that, I am done. I will get into the next topic here. Okay. Gonna start out this next topic with a song that I've played a few times on here, and I think it's a very, very appropriate song, in particular with Lord Southern. But yeah, just listen to the song first.
Yo, Lauren Southern, you attract unclean. Used to shame men for walking away from the scene. Talking about family values, acting so pristine. But look at you now, living out your own me. Single mom by choice, who you trying to deceive? Playing the victim, but it's your lies we perceive. Ex-husband's the villain, that's what you believe. Narcissistic drama, you ain't got no reprieve. You pointed fingers, called men weak and lost. But look at your own life, check the high cost. Crying on Twitter, telling tales of pain. But it's your reflection driving you insane. Switching your stance, playing all sides. Trying to stay irrelevant while your dignity slides. Straight kind of feminist, now a centrist in disguise. Just a washed up grifter, spouting more lies. Cheated on your man with destiny, a blue hair slug. Hypocrisy so thick, you're stuck in the mud. Switching your stance, playing all sides. Trying to stay irrelevant while your dignity slides. Fuck Lauren Southern, she's a sorry girl, white trash. Fuck Lauren Southern, she can kiss my ass. Fuck Lauren Southern, she's a fake ass hoe. Fuck that stupid bitch, she's got to go. From right-wing darling to a centrist charade. Sold out your principles just to get paid. Flipping the script, you ain't got no shade. Sorry, white trash, in your own mess you wade. Twitter tirades crying out for sympathy. What we see through your mask, it's all just hypocrisy. Blaming your ex, but it's clear to see you're the common denominator in your misery. Turned on your allies, left them in the dust. Trying to stay relevant, but who can trust? A chameleon, always adjusting a thrust. Just a grifter, Lauren, and whom we discussed. Victim narratives, twisted and contrived. From drag con puppet to centrist jive. Always rebranding, just trying to survive. But you're exposing yourself, can't hide the lies. Fuck Lauren Southern, she's a sorry girl, white trash. Fuck Lauren Southern, she can kiss my ass. Fuck Lauren Southern, she's a fake ass hoe. Fuck that stupid bitch, she's got to go. Trek off the sod, feminist fraud. Switching sides like a lightning rod. Always a victim, always a martyr. But your story's getting harder and harder. Claiming centrist, but you're just confused. Spinning narratives, always abused. Pointing fingers, playing the accused. But your credibility's been long refused. Self-made martyr, casting stones. Living in a glass house, breaking your own bones. Manipulating stories, changing your tones. Desperate for relevance, through your groans. Cheated on your fed husband, thought we wouldn't see. With destiny of all people, it's hypocrisy. Now you're in a trailer park, trying to get cinched to front. Living off the lies, playing everyone. Fuck Lauren Southern, she's a sorry girl, white trash. Fuck Lauren Southern, she can kiss my ass. Fuck Lauren Southern, she's a fake ass hoe. Fuck that stupid bitch, she's got to go.
Yep. What can I possibly tell you? Lauren Southern is in the news again. She's at it again. This time she's trying to claim credit for building the Manosphere. Now I'm going to take this photo off the screen for a second here because there's another I gotta get all red pill here on people for a second. And yeah, I gotta get all red pill here for a second here. All three of these next topics, Andrew Tate, Raul Tomasi, and what happened with Lauren Southern. I am definitely of the opinion, and it is just an opinion, I don't have anything to back it up, that it is not a coincidence that, for instance, Lauren Southern came out the way she did, and that Andrew Tate is suddenly getting investigated, and all of a sudden, Manosphere content creators are getting their Twitter accounts hacked, etc., etc., etc. All of this is coming out less than a month after the Louis Theroux documentary. Now, I've already done my response to the Louis Theroux documentary, and I'll make it very brief here. Louis Theroux did exactly what I figured he was going to do with that documentary. He made it about the personalities. He made it about the people. He didn't actually discuss any of the topics that were involved in that. I saw some really stupid responses to it. I've seen a lot of, I mean, there was one individual who, and this person is a total fucking idiot, but so there was one fucking idiot on Twitter who said that the Louis Theroux documentary did generational damage to the Manosphere. It didn't, right? It didn't have any real impact on the Manosphere at all because for the most part, most of the guys in the Manosphere knew what was coming in. Yeah, Myron Gaines should have probably not spoken to Louis Theroux. Yeah, he did a video after the fact that covered his tracks. The only problem is that it's only going to be fans of Fresh and Fit and other guys in the Manosphere that are going to look at that video and understand what happened. For the mainstream media, that's not going to be the case, right? For the feminists, that's not going to be the case. They're not going to care, right? And this is what I was talking about earlier with the Dark Forest, right? They don't care. They don't care about the nuances. They don't care about the details, right? I will have to make some content about that at some point because there's upsides and there's downsides to that particular mindset. Now, going back to Lauren Southern's claim that the Manosphere tried to destroy her. Well, gonna run you through two of the photos that she's most famous for, and then another photo that you're not necessarily that you don't know her for. And I'm going to actually break it down to you what actually happened because Lauren Southern used to work for the Rebel. And I mean, I've covered Lauren Southern in the past, right? Like, I mean, sleeping with Destiny, sleeping with Andrew Tate, basically sleeping with whomever would help her advance her career, marrying a Fed, being so self-absorbed with the media, attempting to get Raul Tomasi taken down, right? After Raul Tomasi exposed her lies, right? Getting into, and this one just blows my mind, getting into a serious relationship with Destiny and sleeping with Tate. Not at the same time, obviously. You know, the potential doxing of Black Pigeon Speaks, the reporting of Sandman to the YouTube where Sandman had to take his video down because it was like, if he hadn't taken that video down, people would have been able to dox him to track him to where he was living. Also getting Gavin McGinnis in trouble. Now she has done some good work. She's done really decent work with, for instance, exposing the residential school scam and she's also done some fairly decent work around the situation in South Africa. But even with that situation in South Africa, she potentially inadvertently potentially got Gavin McGinnis in trouble. Now, here's the thing, right? And I'm going to post up this photo. What is Lauren Southern's actual contribution to the Manosphere? Because I can tell you right now that, her first involvement was around 2014. Yeah, I'm going to guess late 2014, early 2015 is when she first made an impact. The whole situation, like the Manosphere was already growing at an absolutely astronaut. It was back in the mid 2010s where the number of men in the Manosphere, in particular in MGTOW, was doubling, like literally every single year. And the Manosphere was doing along just fine before Lauren Southern helped build the Manosphere, right? Like she didn't help build the Manosphere. But I'm going to post up the photo that actually got her, two of the more famous photos that got her and that she's well known for. And then I will also cover something with what she did with Miley and Apples. But basically, there were two things that she did specifically around the Manosphere, and both of them were more around anti-feminism than they were about the Manosphere itself. But the first one here, and this one is really big because she was like, slut walks were the thing that actually put her on the map. It was literally the thing that put her on the map. But this photo right here, this happened in Vancouver in 2014. This was I believe it was the 2014 slut walk. By the way, I was recording Nick Redding at the 2014 slut walk in Edmonton. This is the year before, because the year afterwards. This photo came up the year after. Now, what she did here, because she was still working with Rebel News at the time, is that she posted this up and it got an immediate reaction. And of course, men being men, you have this hot, young, blonde woman who, in the quotation of some of the guys who met her in 2015, was just fucking stunning, gorgeous as fucking whatever, right? Making these statements. And a lot of men in the Manosphere embraced her, because you had that this was a relatively new thing, right? When you had these chicks embracing quote unquote embracing conservatism, right? This was a relatively new thing. And I'm going to point out something here about her, which I will get into later on. But I mean, yeah, this is the photo that put her on the map, right? There was an issue back in the mid 2010s called rape culture, and it was basically this feminist theory that like there was an actual misogynistic, that the men were quite happy to look the other way while men raped women, and that there was an actual culture centered around raping women, right? And this was a very, 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 in part of it was definitely tied into the slut walk for sure. This was a very prominent thing. Lauren Southern and a few people, and in particular Milo Yiannopoulos and a few, but this falls into more, went a long way into debunking this. That is Lauren Southern's contribution. Now, this is her at the slut walk, I believe in 2014, back when she was still working with Rebel. This is her at 2015. The guy on the left is known as Walking Away Man. I am the only guy that has ever done an interview with this person. Now, what is not so well known is that he was actually recorded. You can't see it because it's in his left ear, right? But I mean, he actually had a hidden camera on him. He was recording everything at this particular event, right? And you know, this is one of the was one this is a photo that has come up with anti MGTOW. This is one of the photos that made Lauren Southern famous. Now, I was not at that particular slut walk that day because that particular slut walk just happened to coincide with a rather seriously personal event that I was going through, and I had to prepare for that, and I could not attend that particular slut walk. But those two events put Lauren Southern on the map. And then, of course, she also went and covered the LA slut walk via Breitbart with Milo Yiannopoulos and exposed the absolute debauchery that was going on at the LA slut walk. And, you know, she got her chops. By the end of it, though, she was not working with Rebel News anymore, and she was an independent, and she went on to do the documentary in South Africa. And, she had her time in the Manosphere, and there were a lot of guys in the Manosphere that openly embraced her because, again, right, young, hot, blonde, good looking, right? You know, Ashley St. Clair, Sydney Watson, there's a number of women that fall into that category and with consistency, right? Um, you know, there were men that were willing to excuse me for a moment here, my throat's getting kind of dry. That were willing to overlook it. And I'm not going to get into all of the personal foibles. I mean, I've heard some rumors over the years, and I've already covered a lot of the stuff around Lauren Southern before, right? What it is, though, is that she is claiming here that she helped build the Manosphere. And I can tell you, as a guy who was in the Manosphere at the time when she was strongly involved in the Manosphere, that she did no such thing, right? A lot of her stuff was anti-feminist, and she definitely contributed to the downfall of the slut walks and exposing the slut walks, but that was about it, right? What I also am going to say about Lauren Southern is that MGTOW said a lot of stuff. Now, I mean, again, right? I am MGTOW myself, and my take on women in the Manosphere is that they have to prove themselves. There are a lot of guys specifically in MGTOW though that don't give a shit about that and will attack Lauren Southern just because she was a woman. I didn't necessarily agree with it at that time, but all of the things that you are seeing Lauren Southern do now, MGTOW was pointing this stuff out a decade ago about her. Right? Again, like not every woman that has been involved in the Manosphere or has championed men's issues has gone the route of Lauren Southern, right? Lauren Southern's history, which I have covered previously, on a few occasions, it shouldn't really be that big of a surprise, right? That she would be that egotistical and that self-centered and that self-absorbed about the Manosphere and believe that her impact on the Manosphere is outsized compared to what actually occurred, because what actually occurred wasn't particularly all that much, right? Now, Lauren Southern has made accusations about Andrew Tate, whom she's, again, because Mr. Robinson in Britain saw her leaving Tate's hotel room the morning after. And his response when he saw that was that, well, that's not the response of a woman that has just been sexually assaulted by Andrew Tate, right? Debunking her claim right off the bat. You know, my personal gut feeling is that she's attempting to take advantage of the Louis Theroux documentary, and she's attempting to play the victim card here. And again, like when I get into what's going on with the Louis Theroux, I'm thinking that a lot of the issues that are currently coming up are tied in to the Louis Theroux documentary. People are falsely believing that the Louis Theroux documentary did, to quote one person on Twitter, did generational damage to the Manosphere, and that is not what happened. It can tell you, being involved in the Manosphere, that is not what happened. Sorry, it's just not. The damage just ain't fucking there, right? I know there's a lot of people that want it to be there, but it's not, right? Yeah, Lauren Southern did not help build the Manosphere. She came in, she covered the slut walks, and she kind of did a part in discrediting the feminist concept of rape culture, which was a very, very prominent thing back in the mid 2010s. But that was it. She had no other issue. She had no other contribution to the Manosphere. And technically speaking, if you really wanted to get into it, exposing the slut walks probably falls more under the purview of anti-feminism. Now, on to the next one. Andrew Tate. Very triggering guy. Very outspoken, very loud. He's willing to say the things that are willing to upset people, right? I'm going to have to imagine that at some point, the individuals in Great Britain that keep trying to get Andrew Tate back to Britain and keep trying to get him deported from Romania or Dubai or wherever the hell he's currently staying. Oh, by the way, the restrictions that the Romanian government had on Andrew Tate have been lifted. But there have been multiple attempts by people in Britain, and I'm just thinking that it's, again, late March, right after the Louis Theroux documentary, all of a sudden, the investigation into some stuff that happened back in 2016 with Andrew Tate got reopened, right? Are they going to find anything? Well, again, Andrew Tate has made more than a few mistakes over the years. He's far from a perfect human being. He likes to brag. He's loud. He can be a little bit obnoxious. He's definitely outspoken. He has definitely allowed his mouth to run off and cash checks that other people have been able to twist meaning on to push their agenda. He definitely, I don't know whether he's doing it now, but the incident that caused him to land in jail could have been very easily avoided for Andrew Tate if he had just simply had his head of security do a careful background check on those two women that were at his mansion. In fact, he should have been doing that right from the very start. And again, I got to tell you, because again, right, this just keeps coming up. He's somewhat antipathic towards MGTOW, and he's not necessarily going to. And again, this is something that's really frustrating because it's like this is what I'm talking about, the dark forest, right? Dismisses some stuff that MGTOW says about women because his worldview doesn't he's not willing to totally embrace that the concepts that MGTOW brings into the Manosphere, right? That is on Andrew Tate. That is not on MGTOW. But yeah, they reopen this. Are they gonna find anything? Yeah, who knows, right? You're talking about a case that happened 11 years ago. There's definitely a faction in Great Britain that wants him to end up in jail. They keep trying to put him in jail. They keep failing to do it because they keep trying to twist the legal system around to get to their point rather than actually focusing in on it. But again, right, the whole situation with what's going on with Tate is that I mean it's I again, right, going back to the point of topic number 3 here is the fact that this came out less than a month after the Louis Theroux documentary. So again, right, what you're potentially seeing here is else in the somebody else who's got a axe to grind with Andrew Tate is attempting to capitalize on the Louis Theroux Netflix documentary to try and go after Tate again. I personally think if there's going to be a stage 4 moment with the Manosphere, it's potentially going to involve Andrew Tate, but it could involve somebody else. It could involve an absolute nobody, for all I know, right? But I mean, again, I'm just gonna say it, right? The fact that they chose to do this now, shortly after the Thoreau documentary came out, probably not a coincidence. Now, going into topic number 3, and this happened only 48 hours ago. In fact, topic number 4, I only found out about yesterday. Rollo Tomasi and a couple, I know Sneeko, I don't know if there were others that lost their Twitter, but Rollo Tomasi's Twitter account got hacked. He no longer has control over it. Now, again, I'm finding the actions of Lawrence Southern and the fact that Andrew Tate is now being investigated again, and that this would happen to Rollo Tomasi. And all of this is coming out 3 to 4 weeks after the Louis Theroux documentary got released. Now, it could just be a coincidence. I don't think it is. That's an opinion, not a fact, though. But yeah, Rollo Tomasi, and this is something that needs to be emphasized because he has posted up some content on YouTube. He still has his YouTube, he still has his Instagram, by the way. But he does not have control over his Twitter account anymore. And I'm thinking that the Manosphere content creators were specifically targeted. Rollo Tomasi's situation was specifically a DMCA takedown. He's been like, I contacted him on Instagram and I asked him if he got his channel back. I got a response, no. Does he have it back now? I don't know. But I mean, yeah, it's not a I don't think it's a coincidence that all of this stuff just all happens to come down less than a month after the Louis Theroux documentary. Some people, feminists in particular, think they smell blood and think that the Louis Theroux documentary actually did damage, and it didn't. Right? Yeah. uh like there's a few people that are kind of like aggressively pushing and trying to act like it's an own. Here's the thing, right? They act like it's an own, but when they actually come into the Manosphere, they find that the Manosphere hasn't been damaged at all. And again, right? Louis Theroux's documentary sounded and looked good to the anti-Manosphere crowd because Thoreau made it about the personalities and not about the issues. That being said, though, you know, that there really isn't nearly as much damage as a lot of these people like to think they've done. They actually haven't done that much damage, by the way. The damage is almost minimal. And the whole issue around this is the fact that, I mean, you know, what you're seeing with this right now is kind of, I think, almost like a preview of what's going to happen. Because I did say at the start of the year that the Manosphere was going to start engaging in a sustained attack. I didn't think it was going to start happening quite this early. I didn't think they were really going to start going after the Manosphere until probably like middle of the year. But from a political perspective, and this just kind of blows my mind that Kamala Harris blames Andrew Tate and Myron Gaines for her losing the fucking election. No, Kamala Harris lost that election. The Democrats did that to themselves, right? Ultimately, long term, and I have said this at number 20 with the Louis Theroux documentary. I'm going to say it again, right? The long term, there's not going to be any long term effects on the Louis Theroux documentary because there's not really much there. It's just a bunch of focusing in on personalities and focusing in on HS Tiki Taki. And of course, Nico, who also had his Twitter account hacked, by the way. But I mean, there has been no lasting damage done to the Manosphere by this. And what you're witnessing with this is that you're seeing a bunch of people who think that they've got a chance to go in and take a shot at the Manosphere. And the shot is pretty much, it's, Rollo's still around. Tate is still around. Lauren Southern is going to continue to lose credibility, just like Ashley St. Clair is going to lose credibility, just like Tommy Lahren is going to lose credibility, just like Sydney Watson, etc., 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 etc. Because, like, ultimately, what it comes down to, folks, is that this group here, MGTOW, continues to get ignored in some of the things that they keep saying about women. And you get women like Lauren Southern, Ashley St. Clair, Sydney Watson. And I could go on, right? And, when push comes to shove, they end up discrediting themselves. They end up proving everything that MGTOW has been saying about them. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, obviously, right? But for the guys in the Manosphere, or the guys in the conspiracy, in the truther community, or the guys in some of the conservative communities, it's sort of like, yeah, you really do. And I get it that it's an uncomfortable truth, but you really do need to be listening to what specifically MGTOW has been saying about women. Yeah, you can go, oh, well, they're just bitter incel virgins that can't get laid. You know what? You can be dismissive like that, right? Or you can listen and not have to fucking find out the hard way, right? And ultimately, what it's boiling down to here is that, I mean, right? What you're seeing here with the in terms of the manosphere is you're seeing a group of people who think that they've done some damage to the manosphere. Just like there was a bunch of fucking feminists in 2024 who thought that choosing the bear was some kind of a fucking own, even though it really wasn't. Yeah, that type of thing, right? Um, Gonna leave it right there because I still got one more topic to cover, and this one is actually gonna be a little bit heavy. So, yeah, I'm just gonna switch over right now. Okay, this one's gonna be a little bit awkward because it's like, you know, this is one of those topics that, again, feminists are doing this to themselves. Feminists are attempting to project this out to somehow equate to all men, are attempting to make men feel guilty about being men because this particular site, motherless.com, has some very probably the best word would be unsavory content on it, and a lot of rape content on it. At least I gotta keep in mind, according to CNN. Now, keep in mind, CNN is a very suspect source of information on something like this, right? Like CNN has done some pretty crap investigations, in particular when it comes to the manosphere. But this isn't necessarily about the manosphere, although there have been feminists that have been attempting to project this about the manosphere. So, what is basic? And it's, I have to point this out though, because this is one of those topics. And I mean, I recently ran into this with Jeremy Hambling, and I've also run into this a few months ago around the Trump Hitler situation. You see, I happen to be a bit of a connoisseur of World War II documentaries. Now, one of the things that happens is that I've listened to a lot of World War II documentaries, the stuff that happened before World War II, the stuff that happened during World War II, and the tail end of World War II. And I know what happened, and I know how the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, conducted themselves, right? What they did in no way resembles what happened with Trump. I got into a major, and some people actually tried to argue history with me on this. And I said, well, no, this is like Trump is, there's a lot of things, and I'm not going to go into all of you, but there's a lot of stuff that Trump is not doing that in no way resembles anything. In a lot of stuff, very little overlap between Trump and the Nazi Party, or between Trump and Hitler. Being familiar with history, though, somehow, and yet some people actually accused me of being a Nazi because I knew about the actual history of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, before World War II, how they conducted themselves, how they did things. Same thing happened literally yesterday with, well, actually, it dragged out over 2 days with Jeremy Hambling. Jeremy Hambling, I bringing him up second because Jeremy Hambling talked one time about how some creep got caught with child porn, and how he said the issue is basically, well, this fucking idiot was really stupid, and if he didn't want to get caught, he should have done this, right? Now, I have pointed out that I have listened to enough true crime documentaries and have seen comments on some of these documentaries after the fact where, no, this guy's a fucking idiot. He should have done this, right? That's effectively what Jeremy was doing, right? Now, in the mind's eye of some people who are critical, I gotta also point out that as of the reading of this, Jeremy Hambling is also currently dealing with a situation where and a, he looks guilty, but he allegedly has been accused of getting critics of his getting their YouTube channel shut down, which is something that you just don't do to your YouTube critics. Like, you just don't fucking do it, right? Like, it's verboten. It's considered bad form, right? And I mean, yeah, there are exceptions to the rule. Like, obviously, like there was that one case with SS Sniper Wolf doing that with that one guy that bordered on call to action and harassment. There are exceptions to every rule, but basically, you do not go onto YouTube and get your critics' channels shut down, which is something that Jeremy Hambling allegedly has been doing. Now, circling back to the original topic, right? I watched that particular video where Jeremy Hambling was talking about this, and there were a bunch of people, mostly people who disliked Jeremy Hambling, that were accusing him of endorsing child porn, which is not what happened. Now, there was one real massive fucking idiot who used a bunch of ad hominem and basically accused me of supporting child porn because I was pointing out that that's not what happened in that video. This is what happened. Being familiar with what was actually said versus what they were actually saying was happening made me an endorser of child porn, right? That's the and he stuck with it. And again, like, I had to go in, I had to systematically take this guy down. And of course, once I started getting into specifics and started demanding details and more or less asking the one particular question, which was like, how does knowing what actually happened, how does seeing the video and knowing what was actually said in the video, how does that make me a supporter of child porn? The guy backed off. The guy basically, well, it was like, I have better things to do with my time. It's like, no, he didn't have better things to do with time. He had no fucking argument. Now, this is one of these situations. Now, yesterday, this person, Courtney Byers, otherwise formerly known as porn star Allison Tyler, made a statement about this website here, motherless.com, a site that I've known about but I've never been to. At least I don't recall ever being to it. I didn't really, it's never really fallen on my radar. I've heard of it, but I've never really gone to it, right? She made this big, and she drank out of a feminist mug, and she talked about how there were 61 million hits because of this CNN investigation, right? And of course, when I started digging, I started finding all of these other links. And what was basically going on here is that you were getting feminists. And I mean, I'm finding it very ironic that a former porn star is trying to take the moral fucking high ground on this issue, right? I mean, like, yeah, I don't take fucking morality lectures from a porn star. That being said, what motherless.com was doing is that they had, and again, I wouldn't know because I've never gone over. I've never gone over to Motherless that I don't recall. And is that there was a bunch of instructional videos on there about how to rape and whatnot. I don't know whether it was true or not. But what I was seeing here is that in her content, it's like, oh, well, 62 million men, not all men, but it's always men. And I saw this narrative being pushed by a lot of feminists, right? They were using this particular, and I gotta point out, man, this was CNN. So it's like, you have to consider the source here, but just because it's CNN does not necessarily mean it's not legitimate, right? Uh, the whole thing with with what's going on Motherless and this content is, I mean, I also have to point out that Pornhub have been, and a lot of these other adult websites have been looking the other way with underage porn on their sites as well, right? So this is not something that is exclusive to Motherless, although maybe there was an actual group on Motherless that was actually taking part in this, and somebody decided to expose them, which is a good thing because it's like, while there is no rape culture in the West, right? What they did, and specifically what she did in particular, which is why I ended up finding out about this, is that they were attempting to smear all men and make all men the guilty culprits for doing this. Now, not all men, right? And it's like, yeah, Motherless is, and I'm not going, I have to say this does not constitute me endorsing this type of content. I do not endorse this type of content, right? And I have to say that because what was going on here is you had feminists running off on this. And they knew they could run off on this because they knew guys in the Manosphere weren't going to get into the muck here and try to defend this, because it's like this is a very hard thing to defend, right? And I'm not defending the assholes who are putting up this rape content. What I am going to defend here and what I am going to point out here is that, yeah, it is not all men. And what feminists were trying to do was trying to project this out to all men and to try to make all men feel guilty, even though, this dude right here did a very, Rolo, did a very extensive background last year on female teachers that were sexually assaulting their male students. Things like that. Sex crimes are not something that is just simply limited to men. And what you saw with this particular issue were feminists attempting to project this out to all men and trying to make all men feel guilty about this, even though most men would never go along with disgusting content like this. And in the process of having to deal with this particular topic, right? Like, I have to keep emphasizing that. I mean, I do not endorse this content. I do not watch this type of content. I have never been over to Motherless, at least not that I can recall. And, you know, what they're attempting to do here is they're saying it's not all men, but it is all men, right? And they got all their allies lining up to try to smear all men about this. And ironically enough, though, what you're actually running into here is the fact that feminists, to a certain degree, are looking for anything that they can at this point to take a run at men, right? Like the whole misandric culture. And this is an example of it. Gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And each of these accusations gets more disgusting and harder to deal with and harder to explain and harder to defend. And I mean, again, right? Like, yeah, it's not all men, but you had women like Courtney Byers here on her Instagram page suggesting that it was all men. And you saw multiple feminists online attempting to suggest that it was all men without actually saying it. But here's the thing, right? They're not, I mean, I've run into this particular type of language before, right? Hate to break, I mean, I don't want to start going bad. I don't want to be quoting Goddard's Law here, but I mean, like, when, for instance, I had the chance to actually listen to English translations of a certain, well, fuck, I'll just say it, Adolf Hitler's fucking speeches in English, right? You listen to them and it's like, he uses that same shaded language. And I have seen that same coded language used by, there was a Native American woman who used that same coded language to suggest that there should be a racial genocide against whites. This happened a few years ago, right? Like, I have seen this particular type of, and I mean, I've also seen white supremacists use this language as well, right? They don't say it's all men, but they leave it open enough to suggest that it's all men and that all men somehow need to feel responsible for this. One of the most classic moves in this regard with feminism involves a feminist by the name of Pamela O'Shaughnessy, otherwise known as Vilia Tiptree, who was a author and a book writer and wrote legal crime, true crime books. And she used this particular type of language in an article that came out in 2012, right? That suggested that 90% of the men on the planet just simply needed to be killed. She didn't outright, and she actually even came out with an internet article in 2015 saying that she denied that she was going to do this, that she didn't call out for the killing of all men. The only problem is that no, she didn't actually come out with the killing of all men, but she didn't make a direct call to action because that is a violation of the First Amendment in the United States. What she did is she shaded it in such a way where she wasn't going to be held legally accountable. That's exactly what they're doing here. It's like, well, it's not all men, but it is men, right? Never mind the fact that 62 million men could be anywhere on the planet. And this particular website, don't know what the international numbers are. Like, I haven't seen the metrics for it. Don't know who has been watching the stuff, what country, whatnot. Like, I mean, like, they can give you metrics for the site, but they can't necessarily give you, I mean, what they're suggesting here is that there are 62 million men that are all watching this particular content. And again, without actually having to go to Motherless, I don't know what's on Motherless, so I don't know what type of content. I'm going to have to assume it's adult content of some type. It did have a bit of a reputation behind it, but to suggest that there were 62 million users on Motherless and that they were all going to this particular content is a bit of a stretch. trying to lay it out on all men that they were in support of this, or all 62 million men went to these particular videos. Again, I would have to see the actual content and I would have to see the actual numbers to know, right? So, yeah, that 62 million number is the number of people who went to the website, not the actual number of people who actually saw said videos or were in support of said videos. This is an attempt by feminism to project this out to all men and to take numbers and to exaggerate those numbers to make things look bigger than what they actually are. Now, by no means am I attempting to minimize this type of behavior, right? An individual who would engage in drugging women just to have sex is a pretty fucking pathetic and disgusting human being. And I think they should be thrown in jail and the key tossed out, right? But again, right, the way the feminist community was acting about this was pretty disgusting and pretty low. And it's kind of what I was expecting. I mean, I like to say I'm kind of shocked about what happened, but I'm not, you know? And it came from CNN, and, you know, no disrespect, but I don't take, just like that one woman on Twitter who suggested the best thing you could do for the Manosphere is to fight the Manosphere. Is like, I mean, I don't take fucking moral lectures from porn stars. And by the way, yeah, I did take a look at Allison Tyler's backlog, right? Um, yeah, she's got a fairly significant body of work as an adult performer, right? Um, Going all coy after the fact and trying to act morally superior kind of falls apart in that. Now, again, people can and do change, right? And, but I mean, again, right, when it comes to the feminists and how they've been responding to this, they knew they could push on this one because they knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of guys, a lot of people in the Manosphere that were going to call them out on it, because it's one of those issues where the very process of calling out the way the feminists were acting on this can be easily translated into that person who's calling them out defending this type of behavior, right? I can say that I don't defend this type of behavior. I could say it multiple times, right? But like what happened with Jeremy Hembling, right? What happened with the Louis Theroux documentary is that most people, and again, right? For instance, Myron Gaines covered his ass when it came to Louis Theroux, and there was an individual who literally did a response video to Myron's takedown and tried to lie about what Myron Gaines had done. Right? So it's not going to matter what I answer to this, right? Like, I mean, right? It's just one of those thorny issues. But again, right? For the guys in the Manosphere that are listening to this, right? This is the type of mentality that you're dealing with feminists right now. And you need to be keeping that in mind. If you don't keep that in mind, right? I mean, you know, you might fall into one of their traps. And as disgusting as I find this particular type of content on Motherless to be, and I do find it rather disgusting and pathetic, right? There's not 60, I'm just going to write, again, I don't know the metrics. I don't know the view count, but I seriously doubt that the videos in question on Motherless have 62 million views. 62 million is the number of people who went to Motherless. not the number of people who actually went in and viewed this specific content. That's another misrepresentation. And with that, I am done for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Yeah, I will try to do Red Pill Nation. I will probably be doing it early tomorrow afternoon or maybe in the morning. I'm actually going to be stepping out here in a minute to go and grab something to eat, though, before I go to bed. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a good night. And here we go. I am going to finish off with my usual song. I'm going to try Coherence Curve first. Let's just go out with Coherence Curve. No, we won't do Coherence Curve. We will do... Oh, fuck it. We'll do Coherence Curve.
Signal bleeds across
Thank you very much. That's the end of the show. Have a good night.